Robin Roberts is a blazing talent of American television, the woman who transformed Good Morning America into a refuge of truth, warmth, and unshakable strength for millions of viewers across decades. Her masterful storytelling, her immovable resolve, and her deep emotional intelligence lifted her far beyond the title of journalist. She became the anchor America held on to whenever the world trembled. From the humble shores of Mississippi to the very summit of national broadcasting, she proved that greatness can erupt from simplicity, discipline, and a heart born to battle every storm. But behind that extraordinary legacy lies a battlefield of scars. Robin survived the terror of breast cancer, then endured the near-fatal blow of MDS, a disease that dragged her to the very edge of life. And now, at 65, a new storm is crashing straight into her life. Fierce, merciless, and ready to rip apart the fragile peace she spent a lifetime fighting to protect. Before we step into the heart of that storm, don't forget to leave a like, a gesture of gratitude for a woman who has never fallen. No matter how dark or unforgiving the sky becomes. It's heartbreaking how fate can be cruel from the very first breath. And Robin Roberts stepped into a world where the winds tested her before anyone even knew she existed. She entered this world on November 23, 1960, in Tuskegee, Alabama, the youngest of 4 children in a household ruled by discipline, duty, and a silence shaped by the weight of her father's past. Colonel Lawrence E. Roberts, one of the storied Tuskegee Airmen, carried unspoken memories in the rigid line of his shoulders and the distant focus of his eyes. Her mother, Lucy Marion, wove faith, music, and tenderness into the cracks left behind by military life, softening the hardness without ever erasing it. Growing up at the crossroads of a gentle mother and a battle-forged father, Robin learned as early as 5 years old that strength was not granted. It was demanded. The home was loving, yes, but beneath that love pulsed the tension of a man who had witnessed the worst of humanity, and a woman determined to lift her children above a world that could be cruel without warning. Her earliest memories were not of carefree laughter, but of the unyielding order of a military household, where the smallest task mattered, and nothing was ever done halfway. As the baby of the family, she felt deeply cherished, yet closely scrutinized. She was shaped, guided, and sometimes pushed harder than she understood. "My parents taught us the 3 Ds: discipline, determination, and D-Lord," she would later recall. And those words were not encouragements. They were law threaded into every breath of her upbringing. Excuses were not indulged. Weakness was not entertained. And the world outside their front door offered no refuge. Alabama and Mississippi in the 1960s carried the quiet, cutting edges of segregation, where glances lingered too long and doors opened differently depending on who stood before them. By age 10, Robin already knew what it felt like to be overlooked, underestimated, or judged before she spoke. The sting of subtle prejudice did not break her spirit. It sharpened her resolve. When the family eventually settled in Pass Christian, Mississippi, Robin stepped into a coastal town both stunning and unforgiving. Life there was modest, humble, and shadowed by the constant threat of storms. She was just 8 years old when Hurricane Camille roared ashore in 1969, a night of violence the entire Gulf Coast would never forget. She watched roofs lift like paper, trees twist into splinters, and neighbors cling to whatever pieces of their lives the wind hadn't taken. The next morning, she walked through streets littered with glass, branches, and memories torn apart. These storms were more than natural disasters. They were blunt, merciless teachers. They showed her how quickly safety could shatter, how easily certainty could collapse, and how survival required courage long before comfort. She absorbed these truths not with fear, but with a quiet steadiness that settled into the deepest parts of her young spirit. Yet amid the discipline, the storms, the unspoken weight of war, and the harsh social realities of the Deep South, something extraordinary was taking shape inside her. Robin excelled in school, graduating as salutatorian in 1979, and her athletic fire ignited with the force of someone who had been waiting her entire life to breathe freely. Basketball and tennis were not hobbies. They were her escape, her transformation, her rebellion against every force that tried to keep her small. Coaches saw her hunger. Teachers saw her brilliance. Friends saw her kindness. But only Robin understood the iron being forged inside her. Forged by the clash of military rigor, racial barriers, and a world where storms could erase a childhood in a single night. These early wounds did not weaken her. They forged the steel of a woman who would one day stand unshaken, no matter how fierce the winds became. The world did not simply refuse to open its doors for Robin Roberts. It slammed them so violently in her face that at just 22, she learned to force her way through the cracks with trembling, scraped hands and a heart that refused to surrender. In 1982, freshly graduated from Southeastern Louisiana University, she carried only a diploma, a burning dream, and the unshakable values her parents had instilled in her. But the moment she stepped toward the broadcasting world, reality hit her with a coldness she had never known. Her first job in 1983 at WDAM in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, paid so little that she often joked later, "I made more money babysitting in college." Yet even in the joke, there was pain. She worked 12 to 14 hours a day because she understood, with brutal clarity, that no one in that newsroom believed a young black woman could survive, let alone thrive, in sports journalism. "I knew I had to be twice as good just to be considered equal," she would recall decades later, her voice steady, but her eyes still carrying the weight of those early wounds. During those years, hunger wasn't about food. It was the relentless fire inside her, the ambition that kept her awake long after midnight. Money was painfully tight. She drove battered used cars that wheezed, coughed, and sometimes died on deserted Mississippi back roads after late-night shoots. She lived in cramped, drafty apartments where winter crept under the door and wrapped itself around her ankles. Turning the heat on wasn't an option. It meant risking going over budget. There were nights when rain dripped through a warped window frame, tapping rhythmically onto the carpet, and Robin sat at her tiny kitchen table, head in her hands, whispering to herself, "Hold on, Robin. Just hold on. You're not quitting now." She wasn't homeless, but she was painfully alone, 23, 24, 25 years old, fighting exhaustion and fear while clinging to a dream no one else could see. Her life balanced precariously on short-term contracts that could disappear overnight with a simple management shuffle. And more than once, they nearly did. She uprooted her entire world again and again, from Hattiesburg to Biloxi in 1984, from Biloxi to Nashville in 1986, then to Atlanta in 1988, each move stripping her down to nothing. No friends, no familiar faces, no safety net, just another town where she had to prove from zero that she deserved to exist in the very profession she loved. She carried her own camera gear, drove herself to rural high school stadiums, set up tripods in mud, wrote every script by hand, and edited late into the night long after the newsroom lights had shut off. She became her own cameraman, her own producer, her own driver. Not out of ambition, but out of sheer survival. She never forgot the sting of one moment in 1987 when a male coworker brushed past her and muttered, "Sports isn't a place for women." Another time, an athlete snickered when she walked into a locker room with a microphone, and though the humiliation cut sharply, she later said, "I learned early on not to let someone else's disbelief become my reality." There were nights she drove hundreds of miles along empty southern highways, her old car rattling in the wind, headlights carving slices of white across the darkness. Tears blurred her vision, exhaustion tightened her chest, and she gripped the steering wheel praying she wouldn't fall asleep behind it. She whispered into the darkness, "One day, they'll see me. One day, I won't have to prove I belong." Coaches dismissed her. Athletes underestimated her. Some viewers questioned why a black woman was reporting on sports. But Robin had endured storms far older and far fiercer. Storms of a divided South. Storms of discipline from a military household. Storms of expectation. And slowly, every rejection became fuel. Every closed door became a dare. Every doubt became a spark. Atlanta changed everything. Covering the Braves at age 28 gave her visibility, credibility, and, for the first time, momentum. It was there, in the late 1980s, that she realized she was no longer chasing approval. She was becoming undeniable. And when ESPN finally called in 1990, offering her the opportunity she had fought 7 unrelenting years for, it was not luck. It was the harvest of every lonely mile, every insult, every cold night, every whispered prayer. She walked into the ESPN newsroom not as someone handed a chance, but as a woman who had earned every inch of her rise, inch by inch, heartbreak by heartbreak. Those brutal early years didn't break her. They forged her into a woman the world would never again dare to overlook. Success rarely arrives with fanfare. Sometimes it waits until a soul has endured enough storms to truly deserve it. And when Robin Roberts stepped into ABC News in 1995 at 35, carrying nothing but grit earned through years of fighting for a place in rooms not built for her, success finally met her halfway. She became the kind of correspondent whose warmth didn't need volume. It simply reached people. On Good Morning America, she didn't chase the spotlight. She illuminated it. Viewers trusted her steadiness, her instinct to humanize every headline, her ability to hold the country's hand without saying a word. By the late 90s, millions were whispering, "She feels like family." And in television, there is no higher crown. Then came 2005, the year destiny stopped waiting. ABC placed her in the co-anchor chair of Good Morning America, one of the most pressure-soaked positions in American media. Robin later admitted that her hands trembled that first morning as the floor director whispered, 5, 4, 3, and the studio lights flashed hot against her skin. "Don't lose this moment," she told herself. "You fought too hard to get here." Working beside Diane Sawyer and later George Stephanopoulos, she became the emotional heartbeat of America's mornings. Her laugh, her gentleness, her lean-in empathy transformed GMA into a national ritual. Ratings skyrocketed. And in 2012, after 16 years in second place, GMA rose to number 1. For the first time in her life, Robin allowed herself a private breath. You made it. But what the audience never saw was the cost of that achievement. Robin woke at 2:45 a.m., stepping into Manhattan's icy pre-dawn while the world slept, her breath fogging in the dark as she walked toward a studio still smelling of yesterday's coffee and hot lights. "My alarm clock is the only thing that sees me every morning," she joked. But the truth was a quieter ache. Exhaustion, scrutiny, the burden of holding the nation steady during its worst hours, interviews with presidents at dawn, breaking tragedies at noon, smiling through grief she had no time to process. Some mornings, she stared at herself in the makeup mirror under harsh bulbs, asking silently, "How much more can I give?" And yet, she always gave more. America saw the smile, not the trembling exhale behind it. And as her influence exploded, so did her world. Oscars, the Indianapolis 500, Hannah Montana, Pitch Perfect 2, royal weddings, presidents, documentaries, awards, Peabody, Cronkite, Ash, the Hall of Fame. By the 2010s, the woman who once wrapped herself in blankets to stay warm in a drafty apartment was earning over $18 million a year and owned homes she once thought existed only on postcards. But each new step upward thinned the air. Prestige didn't reduce the pressure, it amplified it. The higher she climbed, the more perfection GMA demanded. Emotional resilience, flawless composure, the ability to carry a grieving nation without letting her voice crack. After the cameras stopped, she often walked alone to her car through empty city streets, the adrenaline fading, whispering, "Lord, give me strength for one more day." She wasn't asking for success. She was asking for survival. Because showing up every day, every year, wasn't a job for her. It was an act of service. And then, at the very height of her power, when she seemed untouchable, life chose its moment. One blow, sudden, merciless. A collapse from heights she had spent a lifetime climbing. And nothing in the studio, not even her legendary composure, could shield her from what came next. It's heartbreaking how a single day can split a life into before and after. And for Robin Roberts, that day came not with noise, but with a silence so heavy it felt like the world had stopped breathing. It was 2007, a year when everything in her life was golden. Success, influence, the trust of millions. And yet, one ordinary morning, the tip of her fingers brushed against a small, unyielding lump, just a slight hardness beneath the skin, but cold enough to send a chill down her spine. At 46, she found herself sitting alone in a sterile exam room, the fluorescent lights above flickering like indifferent witnesses. The doctor entered slowly, holding her chart as though it carried the weight of bad news he wished he didn't have to deliver. When he finally spoke, the words landed like a blow to the ribs. "It's breast cancer." She later said, "It felt like the floor disappeared, but the truth was more brutal. It felt as if the life she had built evaporated in a single exhale. Surgery cut into her strength. Chemotherapy hollowed her out from the inside. Clumps of hair slid from her fingers in the shower. Her eyebrows faded. Food tasted like metal. Even the woman in the mirror began to vanish, until all that remained was a pale, exhausted version of the anchor America thought was invincible. And still, she kept slipping back to the Good Morning America desk whenever her body allowed, draping herself in scarves, leaning on studio chairs during breaks, breathing through waves of nausea while the cameras rolled. She perfected a smile that hid tremors. She sat taller to disguise weakness. "I didn't want people to worry," she admitted later. But privately, she feared something much darker. That the world would see her breaking before she could find the strength to rise. 5 years later, just when hope was finally beginning to stitch itself back into the hollow spaces cancer had torn, fate returned with a cruelty sharper than before. In early 2012, deep purple bruises began appearing across her arms like warnings she didn't yet understand, and exhaustion settled into her bones so heavily that even breathing felt like lifting stone. Sitting in the exam room, she watched her physician's face fall before he even spoke. That expression alone, softened with dread, told her everything. Myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, a rare lethal collapse of the bone marrow. At 49, she wasn't hearing a diagnosis, she was hearing a countdown. Her only hope was a bone marrow transplant, a procedure that required destroying her immune system entirely and praying it could be rebuilt. The thought alone left her breathless. And then came the miracle she hadn't dared imagine. Her sister, Sally Ann, was a perfect match. "I cried before I even said yes," Sally Ann later confessed, because she knew she wasn't just donating marrow. She was handing Robin her future. When Robin announced her condition, "Live on good," Morning America, the country felt the blow with her. And then something extraordinary happened. Tens of thousands of viewers rushed to join the Be the Match registry, causing sign-ups to explode by 1,800% in a single day. It was as if America collectively reached out its hands, refusing to let her fight alone. Even in her darkest hour, her suffering became a spark that ignited hope across the nation. The transplant on September 20, 2012, didn't begin with drama. It began with a stillness so sacred, it felt as if the entire world had paused to watch her fight for her life. Robin lay in a dim, amber-lit room while a bag of new marrow, golden, glowing, hung above her like a second sunrise, fighting through storm clouds. Machines beeped steadily at her bedside, each soft chirp a fragile reminder that her survival now balanced on a wire thinner than breath itself. As the life-giving cells began their slow descent into her bloodstream, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Stay with me. Please stay," as if speaking to the very hope that threatened to slip from her grasp. But the true brutality came after. Isolation swallowed her whole for 100 interminable days. No embraces, no skin-to-skin warmth, no comforting hand to anchor her in the darkness. Nurses moved around her like distant shadows behind masks, gowns, and gloves. Nights stretched into an eerie, endless quiet, until suddenly they didn't. Alarms would erupt without warning, their frantic beeping slicing through the silence as her blood pressure crashed, sending doctors racing to her bedside in a battle fought second by second. Later she confessed, "I didn't know if I'd ever say, 'Good morning, America' again." The mirror offered no reassurance. It reflected only a thin, pale figure she barely recognized, a silhouette fading at the edges, like a candle struggling against wind. But each morning, even when her body felt carved out and hollowed, she forced herself to rise. Sometimes only inch by inch, because choosing life, even when it burned, was her quiet rebellion. And then, slowly, gently, almost shyly, the light returned. At first it was nothing more than a flicker, a steadier breath, a brief moment without dizziness, a lab number that crept upward instead of falling. But flickers became sparks. Her blood counts began to climb with a quiet stubbornness, as if the new marrow was learning the rhythm of her heartbeat and choosing, cell by cell, to fight beside her. Her limbs steadied. Her steps no longer felt like walking through water. Life, fragile yet relentless, was stitching itself back into her bones. And then came February 20th, 2013, the day her story shifted forever. After 174 days of isolation, fear, pain, and unseen battles, Robin walked into the Good Morning America studio once more. The air changed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the cameras seemed to lean in, sensing they were capturing something far bigger than television. She took her seat, the seat she once feared she might never see again. And the lights rose around her like a sunrise she had earned with every ounce of her suffering. Her co-anchors watched her with glistening eyes, stunned and grateful. And then came the moment that held the whole country still. "Good morning, America." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of survival, the warmth of gratitude, the quiet thunder of a woman who had walked to the edge of life and returned with grace. Those 3 words weren't a greeting. They were a declaration. I made it. I'm still here. I'm not done. Across the nation, 6.1 million viewers froze in place. Coffee cups halfway to their lips, hands pausing mid-air, families drifting closer to their screens, as if America itself rose to welcome her home. It didn't feel like a broadcast, it felt like a resurrection, a real-time miracle reminding anyone fighting illness, grief, aging, or fear that the night does not have the final word. Robin didn't just return to television that day, she returned to life, stronger, softer, deeper, shining with a fire no storm could extinguish. And even years later, when a sudden fall on a tennis court in 2024 fractured her wrist and reminded her once more of the body's quiet fragility, Robin carried herself with the same extraordinary grace that had carried her through every storm. She didn't curse the pain. She didn't rage at the setback. She simply breathed, steadied herself, and smiled that familiar, unbroken smile, as if to say, "I've survived worse. I'm still standing." Her journey did far more than save her life. It became a compass for anyone fighting an unseen battle. The aging parent trying to stay strong, the patient in the waiting room praying for good news, the soul wrestling with loneliness in the dark hours before dawn. Robin showed them all that the body may bend, may bruise, may falter without warning, but the spirit, when anchored in courage, can rise again and again, each time brighter, steadier, and more determined than before. She became living proof that comeback is not a moment. It is a choice. A choice to stand back up even when the world expects you to fall. A choice to shine even when life dims the lights. A choice to keep moving forward, gently, bravely, defiantly, no matter how many storms have tried to break you. Her career and her health had tested her again and again, but love tested her in ways far more brutal, beginning with the wound she carried in silence for most of her life. Robin Roberts fell in love with a woman, and she was forced to hide it. Her truth lived behind locked ribs, her heart rationed between fear and longing, her identity wrapped in a silence heavy enough to bruise. So when she met Amber Lane in 2005, the connection struck her with terrifying clarity. A blind date both women nearly canceled. Robin out of exhaustion, Amber out of heartbreak. Yet the moment they sat down, something shifted. No spark, no theatrics, just a quiet recognition, as if each had spent years searching for the other without knowing it. And still, loving openly was impossible. Robin lived in the brightest spotlight on American morning television. Amber lived in the shadows by choice. And so their love learned to breathe in secret, coded hellos, stolen weekends, private rituals that paused the world for a moment before reality snapped back. By their second date, clinking apple lime martinis, they knew they had stepped into something powerful and dangerous. The kind of love that forces a person to decide what parts of themselves they are willing to risk. But the hardest part wasn't secrecy. It was distance. The kind that hollows a heart out slowly, year by year. From 2005 to 2015, they lived on opposite coasts, Robin in New York, Amber in California. 10 years of airport gates and rushed embraces, 10 years of empty beds, of holidays split by flights, of birthdays lived through screens. 10 years of loving someone whose hand you couldn't hold in public. Robin feared the exposure that could cost them both everything. Amber feared being erased. "I never wanted to be her secret," she admitted once, not in anger, but as a truth she had carried too long. Robin held that confession like a stone against her chest, torn between the world that demanded her perfection and the woman who offered her peace. They broke and mended, drifted and returned, fought and forgave. But even at their most fragile, gravity kept dragging them back to each other. Because some loves are not chosen. They insist. And then came the years that exposed what love looks like when everything else is stripped away. In 2007, breast cancer tore through Robin's life with merciless force. The world saw strength. Amber saw the collapsing hours no camera would ever record. She held Robin's hair as it fell. She steadied her when chemo buckled her knees. She wiped her face after night sweats, guided her trembling hands, whispered through the fear Robin tried so hard to hide. And when Robin survived that war, fate returned with a sharper blade, MDS, in 2012. A diagnosis that felt like standing on the edge of an unseen cliff. Amber watched monitors flicker through long nights, pressed her palm to the glass barrier during isolation when she wasn't allowed to touch Robin at all. And then, as if cruelty needed symmetry, 2022 brought the blow neither of them could have imagined. Amber was diagnosed with breast cancer, the same disease she helped Robin survive. Robin shattered in ways she never had before. "I was stronger during my cancer than during hers," she admitted. Because witnessing the person who once saved you walk into the same fire is a different kind of devastation. And so she stayed, exactly as Amber once had. Through chemo, through fear, through every exhausted night when Amber leaned her head on her shoulder and whispered, "Don't let go." After 17 years of secrecy, distance, illness, and choosing each other through every version of darkness, truth finally demanded space to breathe. In a tiny Mexican restaurant, under warm lights and a plate of calamari, they slipped rings onto each other's fingers. Not diamonds, not spectacle, just a quiet yes earned by nearly 2 decades of survival. Their 2023 wedding was sunlight, tears, soft music, close friends, and Lucas the dog in his bow tie, as if he understood the weight of the moment. No theatrics, no stage, just 2 women who had walked through fire and remained side by side. Today, in 2025, they have been together for 20 years. 20 years of distance and reunion, illness and healing, silence and truth, a span of time that would have broken many couples, but somehow welded them stronger. They have no biological children, but they have Sydney, Robin's goddaughter, and a home shaped not by perfection, but by endurance. Their love is flawed, scarred, human, and unshakably real. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but refuses to disappear. And in its quiet resilience lies its power. Love that survives distance, secrecy, fear, and illness doesn't simply endure. It transforms, becoming something stronger than either of them ever imagined. Something that still glows, long after the storms have passed. There is a cruel truth about life and death battles. Sometimes you claw your way back to breathing, yet lose the very people you were fighting to stay alive for. For Robin Roberts, the first blow came long before cancer, long before the world ever saw her body weaken beneath fluorescent hospital lights. It came in 2004, when her father, Colonel Lawrence E. Roberts, the man who built her spine, her discipline, her sense of right and wrong, died without warning. A sudden cardiac collapse, swift and merciless, stole him from the world before she could even whisper goodbye. Robin was in New York chasing breaking news, unaware that miles away in Mississippi, the strongest man she had ever known was taking his final breath. She later confessed, with a guilt that settled deep into her bones, "I wasn't there. I didn't get to hold his hand." When she walked into his silent room, medals still shining on the wall, his uniform neatly folded, his boots aligned as if waiting for morning inspection, something inside her broke. His voice, once firm and steady, echoed in her memory, urging her to stand tall. Yet for the first time, she couldn't. Grief doesn't fade. It sinks. Losing her father left a hollow space inside her that no achievement, no accolade, no broadcast could fill. She returned to Good Morning America only days later because America needed her warmth. But every commercial break became a small funeral, a moment stolen to let pain sweep through her in sharp, private waves. For 8 years, she kept moving, gripping her father's mantra: discipline, determination, D-Lord. Like a lifeline, repeating it silently in green rooms, in car rides, in hotel hallways, trying to stitch a wound that simply refused to close. And beneath that wound lay a deeper bruise, the unbearable knowledge that she never got to say goodbye. She carried that ache through airports, studios, and sleepless nights, imagining the conversations they never had, the hug she didn't give, the last look she never saw. His absence was not a single moment of loss. It was an echo she woke up to every morning, a quiet seat beside her every night. It stayed. It lingered. It shaped her in ways the world would never see. A silent shadow walking beside her through every triumph and every quiet moment when the lights went down. Just a few years after losing her father, while the wound was still raw, still throbbing beneath every breath, fate delivered a second blow with a cruelty that felt almost vindictive. In 2012, as Robin braced herself for the most terrifying medical battle of her life, preparing for a bone marrow transplant after her MDS diagnosis, life struck again. Harder, sharper, as if determined to see how much one heart could endure. Her mother, Lucy Marion Roberts, the quiet architect of her spirit, the woman whose faith had always been the rope she clung to, collapsed. Her decline wasn't slow. It was a free fall, brutal and merciless, as though the universe had chosen the exact moment Robin was fighting for her own life, to rip away the one person she needed to survive it. Robin was lying in a New York hospital bed when the call sliced through the room like a blade. "It's your mother. Come home now." Still trembling from treatments, barely able to stand, she tore out her IV, defied medical orders, and boarded a plane with her hands shaking so violently she could barely clasp them in prayer. By the time she reached Mississippi, Lucy Marion was fading. Breath thin, body fragile, spirit fierce enough to wait for her daughter one last time. Robin held her mother's hand, the same hand that once braided her hair and steadied her childish fears, and watched her mother gather her remaining strength for a final gift. Her voice was airy, breaking, but clear enough to carve itself into Robin's soul. "I'm proud of you, and I need you to be brave now." Hours later, with Robin's forehead pressed to hers, Lucy Marion slipped away. And in that instant, the woman who had taught the world how to stand tall felt herself fall apart from the inside. She was fighting to stay alive. Now she had to fight through a grief so violent it felt like another illness tearing through her. A double war. Two storms at once. Body and heart breaking in tandem. She returned to New York for her transplant moving, as she later said, "Like I was walking underwater, every step heavier without her mother's voice beside her." She whispered their family prayer: light, love, power, presence, into the sterile air, clinging to it through fever spikes, through night sweats, through moments when her fear outpaced her pulse. Losing her father had wounded her deeply. But losing her mother in the very moment she was fighting for her own life nearly obliterated her. She had survived diagnoses, tests, treatments. But surviving heartbreak while her body fought to rebuild itself was something far more brutal. And yet, she rose. She rebuilt. She fought forward with the strength of two lives behind her. Surviving both losses, one swift and merciless, the other agonizingly timed, reshaped her. Grief became the steel in her spine, the quiet fire in her voice, the depth behind every word she spoke on air. And to this day, every time she looks into the camera and whispers with reverence and defiance, "Good morning, America," she carries her parents with her, not as memories, but as the silent force lifting her every single morning back into the light. Perhaps fate has always chosen to test Robin Roberts with merciless double blows, tragedies that strike in pairs, and an eerie shadow called cancer that has haunted her life more than anything else. And that cruel pattern revealed itself with brutal clarity the day she lost Joel Siegel. Joel wasn't just a colleague. He wasn't simply a film critic with a recognizable laugh and quick wit. To Robin, he was family. The kind of rare friend forged in the quiet corners of early morning newsrooms. The friend who shared 4 a.m. coffees, who whispered jokes between segments, who could see fatigue behind her perfect on-air smile and answer it with strength. Joel understood her in ways few did. He saw the woman behind the anchor, the softness behind the discipline. Their bond wasn't loud. It was steady. And in a business that eats people alive, steady was everything. But in 2007, life began to unravel with terrifying speed. Joel had been battling colon cancer for years, fighting with humor even as pain tightened around him like a closing fist. Robin once said, "He taught me how to walk through the world with grace, even when it hurts." And he did. He showed up when others would have stayed home. He made jokes when others would have cried. He tried to protect his friends from the reality of his suffering. But cancer has no mercy for grace. And one June morning, while Robin prepared for the show, the call came. The kind that splits the world into before and after in a single heartbeat. Joel was gone. The shock was so sharp it felt physical. Robin walked onto the Good Morning America set that day because millions still needed their morning comfort. But she moved like someone walking through smoke, dazed, disoriented, trying to remember how to speak while her heart was collapsing. She kept glancing at the chair Joel used to occupy, half expecting him to stroll in late with a joke about traffic or movie critics needing their beauty sleep. Instead, there was only silence. A silence so heavy it felt like another presence in the room. During commercial breaks, she found herself replaying their last conversations. The way he squeezed her hand during difficult weeks. The way he teased her about her competitive spirit. The way he always said, "We'll get through it, kid," with a confidence he didn't always feel. She remembered the tremor in his laughter when pain made humor harder. She remembered the brightness in his eyes when he talked about his son. These memories slammed into her with the weight of a train, each one carving deeper into the reality that he was truly gone. And what made the grief almost unbearable was the timing, the cruel synchronicity that felt like fate mocking her. Robin had barely begun to understand Joel's absence when she felt something unusual, a small, hard knot beneath her skin, a whisper of dread she tried to ignore, a fear she didn't dare name. The irony was vicious. She had just lost her dearest friend to cancer, and within weeks she found herself stepping into the same shadow. That overlap, that brutal echo, turned Joel's death into something even heavier. His loss wasn't distant grief. It was a prelude, a warning, a storm cloud that refused to stop following her. She mourned him through sleepless nights, through quiet drives home, through moments on set when she almost turned to say something to him before remembering he wasn't there. She missed his humor, his grounding presence, his ability to make tragedy feel survivable. And in those early days of her own fear, she found herself wondering what Joel would have told her, how he would have steadied her shoulders, how he would have refused to let her spiral, how he would have made her laugh even on the worst days. Joel Siegel's death didn't just break Robin's heart. It left a blueprint, a kind of map of courage, a reminder that strength isn't the absence of fear. It is walking forward with the fear anyway. And even though the world lost Joel in 2007, Robin never truly did. His voice stayed. His lessons stayed. His friendship stayed. And long after his chair went empty, she carried him, not as a wound, but as a quiet force, a steady echo urging her to keep going, even when the road ahead turned dark. Now, at 65, Robin Roberts stands in a rare chapter of life, one built not on fear or survival, but on abundance, stability, and the kind of peace only earned after decades of storms. Her net worth, estimated at over $55 million, is the culmination of a lifetime spent rising before dawn, carrying America's mornings on her shoulders, and refusing to let adversity dim her voice. Years of anchoring Good Morning America, producing documentaries, writing best-selling memoirs, and securing long-term contracts with ABC have built an empire most could only dream of. Yet her wealth is not just a number. It is a testament to resilience. From modest Southern beginnings to financial freedom, Robin's journey embodies the quiet, awe-inspiring truth that a life can begin with scarcity and still end in brilliance. Her real-world assets paint the portrait of a woman who has earned her comfort piece by piece. Not through extravagance, but through decades of discipline and a lifetime spent rising before dawn. Her primary home in Connecticut is more than a residence. It is a sanctuary crafted with intention. The modern farmhouse-style structure sits on lush, manicured land bordered by tall maples and whispering pines, giving her privacy without isolation. Massive floor-to-ceiling glass walls open the home to the rhythm of the seasons. Winter snow resting softly on the branches, spring light drifting through green canopies, autumn turning the entire property into a tapestry of gold and ember. Inside, warm oak floors run throughout the house, illuminated by soft, recessed lighting that fills every corner with calm. The living room features cathedral ceilings, exposed wooden beams, and a stone fireplace that Robin often lights during early morning journaling sessions. The kitchen, her favorite room, is a bright, open space with marble countertops, high-end appliances, and a breakfast nook where she and Amber share quiet, intimate mornings. Outside, a carefully tended garden stretches behind the house, with stone pathways, flowering hydrangeas, and a secluded seating area where she walks her dog Lucas at sunrise, often stopping just to breathe in the stillness she spent a lifetime fighting to earn. She also keeps a cherished retreat in Key West, Florida, a waterfront haven that feels like an entirely different world. The house, painted in gentle coastal tones of white and sea glass blue, sits just steps from the ocean, where the tide hums against the shore like a lullaby. Broad wraparound porches circle the property, furnished with wicker chairs, swaying hammocks, and lanterns that glow amber at night. The interior is breezy and sun-washed. Wide plank floors, airy vaulted ceilings, seashell decor, and soft linen fabrics that catch the afternoon breeze. But the heart of the home is the private dock extending out into crystal-clear water. Robin's refuge. She spends evenings there with Amber, watching the sun melt into the horizon, the sky turning from peach to violet, as if the universe were repainting itself for them alone. On stressful days, she slips outside to sit by the water with Lucas curled at her feet, letting the ocean quiet her heartbeat. Every inch of the home is a testament to peace restored, balance reclaimed, and a life finally allowed to exhale. Her cars reflect practicality more than showmanship. A Cadillac Escalade for comfort and safety, and a sleek Mercedes-Benz, her only real indulgence on wheels. Inside her home, she owns a curated collection of luxury watches, small but meaningful pieces gifted or purchased after milestones, including a Rolex Oyster Perpetual. She once said, reminded her, "Every second is borrowed, every second is precious." Her closets carry pieces from designers who have dressed her throughout her broadcast career, but never for vanity. Always for professionalism, presence, purpose. She owns no private jets, no yachts, no flashy toys. Her greatest luxury is peace, privacy, and the life she built through endurance. Her daily life now reflects balance, a rhythm she once never had the privilege to experience. She wakes early but no longer at 2:45 a.m., allowing herself slow mornings with Amber before heading to the studio. She protects her health fiercely. Strength training sessions, long walks with Lucas, plant-forward meals, meditation, and the prayer her mother taught her. Light, love, power, presence, whispered every morning like armor. She undergoes regular checkups, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the life she fought to reclaim. Her routines are simple, but sacred. Reading on the porch, cooking with Amber, watching sunsets in Key West, making time for rest in a world that once demanded she ignore her own exhaustion. Her face carries the grace of a woman who lived many lives in one. Radiant, dignified, unbroken. Yet even in comfort, her life is not self-centered. It radiates outward. Robin's philanthropic impact is staggering. Millions raised for Be the Match. Thousands of new bone marrow donors inspired directly by her story. Continuous contributions to cancer research, disaster relief, and education initiatives. She sponsors scholarships in her parents' names, donates quietly to families in medical crisis, and uses her platform to elevate voices often overlooked. She never seeks credit. She simply gives. Her legacy is not just survival. It is service. It is the ripple effect of a life lived publicly with vulnerability, courage, and purpose. Her journey continues to guide those fighting their own private battles, reminding them that strength is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender to it. In her present chapter, love remains her anchor. Amber's health is stable, their bond deeper than ever after 2 decades of choosing each other through storms that might have shattered a lesser partnership. Their home is filled with softness, shared meals, gentle teasing, quiet evenings on the couch, long conversations that stretch past midnight, and an understanding carved from years of fighting for one another. Sydney, her goddaughter, brings youth and laughter into their home, while Lucas trails them with the loyalty only a beloved dog can give. It is a family assembled not by convention, but by love, proof that joy can be built, rebuilt, and reborn at any age. If Robin's journey has touched you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, please consider leaving a like. A small gesture of appreciation for a woman who has given so much of herself to the world. And from all of us here at Golden American Stars, we hope your life continues to be shaped by peace that steadies the heart, health that carries you through each morning, joy that returns in unexpected ways, and abundance that arrives exactly when you need it. May the days ahead be softer than the ones you've already survived. May those you love remain close and safe. And may every hardship you face open into a future brighter, calmer, and kinder than anything your past has ever taken from you.